I would like you to consider ethical decision making in your own life and in business. There's not going to be any right or wrong answer, but I'd like you to think about this in a clear and organized way and come to a decision that you're comfortable with. And it's relevant these days, I think, more than ever, because we have this COVID-19 issue. And examples might be, what if a warehouse can't open safely, but because spacing is too tight? Should it reopen or should it stay closed? If it stays closed, it might lose sales. What about a restaurant? Should it open and if it keeps good contact tracing? But what if it opens after hours and it's crowded, or it doesn't follow the rules like some of the clubs in Toronto? So when should it reopen, and what precautions should be taken for staff? Legally, the requirements are minimal. If you read what is legally allowed in Ontario and in Canada and the United States, the employer doesn't have to do much. It's very basic, the standards of safety. So they might decide that they wish to, go above and beyond, maybe, and lose some profit. They might decide to push the limits to maximize sales. Any decision's valid, but I think you should go about it through an organized process. Here's a news clip.
Death of another Amazon warehouse worker, adding to mounting pressure on the company to protect its workers from this virus. Our Deirdre Bosa, following that story, joins us now. Dee, what can you tell us?
Well, Scott, this is the fourth known case of an Amazon worker that has died of the virus. Amazon has declined to provide total nationwide numbers, but as you said, this adds to mounting pressure and growing labor unrest at the company as demand surges amid the pandemic, as more consumers turn to e-commerce and grocery delivery. Now, warehouse workers are raising concerns that Amazon isn't doing enough to protect them, and they're not putting enough safety precautions in place. This has resulted in a number of strikes and walkouts, which Amazon has said has not affected any operations. But this week, there are signs that that unrest is reaching Amazon's white-collar employees. A senior engineer and vice president, Tim Bray, resigned over the firing of workers that organized or participated in some of these movements. That, in turn, prompted another VP today to defend Amazon in a LinkedIn post. Now, lawmakers, they are taking note. Senators Bernie Sanders and Cory Booker, among others, have written a letter to Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos expressing their concern about the health and safety of warehouse workers. There was also New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has ordered, an investigation into the firing of a worker who was fired and participated in one of these walkouts. But Scott, even as unrest builds, it has done nothing to knock Amazon's share price off the perch that it's been sitting at in recent weeks, even hitting new record highs. Not even Jeff Bezos being called to testify before Congress on a different investigation relating to antitrust can stop the rally that we've seen in shares this year.
Yeah, troubling story nonetheless. Deirdre Bosa, thank you for that. We appreciate your reporting.
For ethical decision making. Well, we have these internal influences. What's previously happened? If you know someone who has been in a workplace accident, you're going to take safety more seriously than someone who hasn't seen it happen and maybe does not understand the risk. Your values. If you value integrity, then you will be against bait and switch advertising. Your circumstances. If you really need the job, you might be willing to lie a little bit or break the rules in order to keep your job. And these are things that are internal to us. And there's also external influences, like how well is the economy doing these days? A job is tough to get. So if you have a job and you see that your boss is not wearing PPE, maybe you keep quiet because you know how tough it is to get a job, and otherwise you'd speak out. The political considerations. Well, it seems like some groups are more willing to wear a mask than others for no other reason than political loyalty. Urgency, if something needs to be done right away. For example, jaywalking is technically allowed as long as you're not near a light, but it's dangerous. You could be hit by a car. So would you jaywalk? Well, some of you might say only if I was in a hurry. If I had to get to work in 5 minutes, I would jaywalk to save time so I could get to work on time. That's the idea of urgency. Is there any policies? There's a lot of school policies right now, and then social conventions. What's normal? Luckily in Canada, it seems wearing a mask in indoor spaces is mostly considered appropriate, but in some parts of the United States, there have been horrendous disputes over it. Not that it'll never happen in Canada, but sometimes people have different attitudes about what's appropriate and what is not. And these are external things. What has happened to you and your situation is unique to you, and then these external influences are sort of part of the community where you live. So, what are some issues in business? Health and safety. Should workplace safety training, having a fire drill, not having a fire drill, replacing the safety equipment, limiting the number of people on the factory floor at a time, allowing people to stop the assembly line if there's a problem, sick days. These are all health and safety issues. Risk management. Sometimes something could cause serious problems, but it's unlikely to happen. Do you plan for everything? Do you only plan for the most likely events? That's each business would do that. The emergency preparedness. You're supposed to have 6 fire drills a year in the TDSB, but sometimes schools don't fit that in. And is that the end of the world, or is that okay? A conflict of interest when your personal objectives interfere with the organization's objectives. If I own stock in a company and I plan to sell it, I might do something for the short term to boost that stock price, even though the long-term health of the company might be jeopardized. Honesty, privacy, in terms of advertisement, in terms of user data, just treating people respectfully in terms of harassment. Some places there's been harassment and it hasn't been dealt with. The reputation. What would sometimes your family might have said? What would you do if how would I feel if these actions were on the front page of the newspaper? So if they were on the front page of the newspaper and you would feel embarrassed and ashamed, that's often a cue not to do it, hence the exercise. The quality of a product. Sometimes it's good enough to be sold, but it's not the best it can be. What does the company decide? And issues of fairness, treating everyone equally with respect. Here's a process to follow. This is the key takeaway, this decision-making process. So when there's an ethical decision, you want to identify the facts. What's happened? If we're going to talk about the employee who was fired from Amazon, they would say that the factory was unsafe, they were blowing the whistle, and people were at risk. Amazon would say this employee was causing trouble and had been warned to get back to work. So what are really the facts? Is there a way to find out how many employees were in the fulfillment center? Was it too crowded? Was there safety equipment? Can we objectively find what's going on? Did the person have a disciplinary record? as many objective things that are not in dispute that we can find, the better. So when you have a decision-making process, identify the facts. Determine if it's legal or not. Some cases, the law has to be involved. For example, if someone is assaulted at work, physically assaulted, that becomes a legal issue and you have to call the police. But if it's just inappropriate jokes and inappropriate comments, that makes them uncomfortable, but it's not illegal just yet. It's just inappropriate. You want to identify what your options are. So if someone is making inappropriate comments, well, we could do nothing. We could fire them. We could have a reprimand in human resources. We could have them go to more training. We weigh them. Well, okay, the training costs will cost money. Firing them, it'll take the time to rehire someone. Doing nothing could make everyone feel badly. You choose an option and then you do it. So that's the ethical decision-making process. So here's an idea about COVID. Should places reopen? So the gyms are open now. Should they stay open or should they close? So let's look at the facts. We have to find out what are the caseloads in each area. Has contact tracing identified any breakouts at the gym? What's happening at the gym? Can we go and see? Are people wearing their masks? Are people staying separate? Are the staff cleaning it or not? Can we be as objective as possible? Because I might say, nothing can go wrong at the gym. The gym's a great place. Let's keep them open. And you might say, no, everyone's close together. There could be trouble. Well, we would argue endlessly. If we could identify the facts, so should the gyms remain open? Can we visit a gym? Can we find any numbers? Can we get an idea of what's really happening? That's the first step. Is this legal or not? It appears that it's not legal at the moment, that it's not like illegal to open a facility in stage 3. We're trying to consider in Ontario, for example, it's allowed, but we're talking about Toronto. Is it illegal in Toronto to have a gym that's open? No, it's within Ontario law. However, it might not be the best idea at the moment. So what are our options? Well, we have to, keep the gym open. Close the gym. And then some options in between. Keep the gym open, but with strict protocols. So hiring more staff to supervise, purchasing cleaning equipment. We'd weigh those 3 options. Closing it. Okay, everyone would be out of work. No one would be at the gym. There's no cost, but there's no money coming in. Keep the gym open. We're getting our sales. We are, people are going and working out and they're enjoying themselves, but possibly there could be a big outbreak, which would be problematic. The middle option, stay open but with strict protocols, that would cost us more money and it might, be a burden to set up all the protocols. Is the increased health and safety worth that burden? Choose your option. And then you go and implement it. So if we choose the option, stay open with strict protocols, we're going to have to go hire extra staff, we're going to have to train our staff, we're going to have to purchase extra cleaning equipment, and then we're going to have to monitor to make sure everything's being done properly. That would be how we implement our decision. So when you do meet in your groups, follow the ethical decision-making process. The idea of negligence in Canada involves these elements. So negligence would be failure to take reasonable care resulting in damage or injury. It is an objectively unreasonable risk of harm. What would a reasonable person do? So, driving 200 kilometers an hour on the highway. A reasonable person would not do that. Dumping byproducts into the Don River. A reasonable person would not do that. Leaving a room of children at daycare unsupervised. A reasonable person would not do that. The test is what an average reasonable person would do. So for it to happen, and you might have this occur at a camp counselor job, is you have to have a duty of care. Someone needs to be in charge of someone else. I'm not in charge of the neighbor's kids. So if they get hurt and I'm next door, there's no negligence because I do not have a duty of care to those kids. Then, however, if I'm at school and there's students in the classroom, I have a duty of care to them. There's the standard of care. What would a reasonable person do? So once I'm in the classroom, what would a reasonable teacher do? If I never attended class because I was at home and I wanted to, watch a movie and not attend class, and someone was injured in class, that's obviously not meeting the standard of care of a teacher. If I'm in a factory, it's reasonable that the equipment would be well maintained and safe to use. If I ignored the equipment falling apart and rusting and people recommending that it be replaced, I'm not following the standard of care of a responsible employer. The actions need to cause harm. So if we're talking about as a teacher, if there's phys ed class and the teacher leaves to go to Tim Hortons, and then there's horseplay and someone's injured, there's a connection between the action and the harm. If we're talking about that factory that I mentioned, that there's a piece of equipment, it sounds like it's breaking, the inspector said that it recommended it should be replaced, it looks rusty, and then it finally breaks and falls over and someone breaks their leg, there's a connection between the action and the harm. If I leave the machinery as is and there's a car accident in the parking lot, there's no connection there. There has to be a proximate cause. Was it foreseeable? If something totally out of the blue happens, it'd just be highly unusual, is totally chaotic. Like phys ed class is happening outside and suddenly a tornado erupts, just something total, or the factory's working normally and the photocopier explodes and causes a fire, that would not be foreseeable. It has to be something that a reasonable person would have been, hey, this is not right. I should do something about this. And it needs to result in damages or injuries. So if the unsafe equipment doesn't hurt anyone, the elements of negligence have not been met. It reflects badly on the boss, but they're not negligent. If the teacher goes to Tim Hortons and nothing happens, they can be disciplined for being a teacher who was absent, but they have not broken the law because there's no damages. So, question I would ask you to think about: what would you do if you saw someone out there breaking the COVID-19 rules? Would you speak up? Would you address them? Would you call 311? Would you do nothing? Would you go somewhere else? Everyone in the class might answer differently to this, and that's okay because it's our personal ethics. However, we want to go through an organized process so that the next day we can live with our actions.